We're just gonna ignore the fact that Damon banged Elena's mom that one time. We're just gonna ignore it. Here is TV Guide's official ranking of every relationship from The Vampire Diaries, the originals, and Legacies. Number 53, Damon and Caroline. There is literally nothing nice to say about this ship since it's full of consent issues and mind control and death threats. It's just not exactly the stuff of great romance. Ultimately, Caroline wasn't so much a ship as it was a way to show us very early on in the series that Damon was an evil, blood-sucking monster, since he was technically introduced as the villain of the show. Regardless, Damon should thank his lucky stars that Caroline forgave him for this abominable period where they were together. Number 52, Caroline and Alaric. I honestly have no idea what The Vampire Diaries was trying to do pairing Caroline and Alaric together, but I kind of hated every second of it. Not ashamed to say it, sorry. Yes, years had passed since Caroline was his student, and there were certainly weirder age gaps on this show, because, you know, vampires. But trying to ship a student and a teacher together just feels wrong, no matter which way you slice it. 51, Klaus and Genevieve. Genevieve was kind of a blink and you'll miss it ship on the originals, but it still counts. Ultimately though, Klaus and Genevieve's connection was mostly physical, and there were far too many double crosses and manipulations on both sides of this relationship to give it much credit. Number 50, Liv and Tyler. Liv and Tyler's love story flew mostly under the radar on The Vampire Diaries, but that's probably just because there were like 18 insane storylines going on at once in season 6. This ship was actually pretty cute, and the only thing keeping it from a better ranking on this list is the fact that Tyler kind of, killed Liv with his bare hands to activate his werewolf curse. It's just not romantic. Number 49, Meredith and Alaric. Talk about ships that flew under the radar. Alaric and Meredith shared a brief tryst in seasons 3 and 4 of The Vampire Diaries, but this relationship always felt like it was built to move the plot forward instead of the other way around. They're ultimately just too snoozeworthy to deserve a better ranking. Number 48, Matt and Penny. Okay, I'm gonna level with you. I'm not going to pretend for even a minute like I cared at all about Matt and Penny's relationship on The Vampire Diaries. However, I am also not going to pretend like that scene where Matt crashes his car and hallucinates Penny's ghost and begs her to take him with her to the afterlife was anything other than devastating emotional torture. That scene came out of nowhere and it has stayed with me until this day. Number 47, Joe and Alaric. Love them, they're the best. Joe and Alaric really kind of got the short end of the stick as far as Vampire Diaries ships go. They had only just started to find their groove when they found out that Joe was pregnant with twins, leading to a shotgun wedding that ended in tragedy. We'll all just have to settle for them creating one of the best duos of all time, Josie and Lizzie Saltzman. Number 46, Rafael and Lizzie. It's kind of hard not to ship all of the Legacies kids with each other considering the great chemistry that cast has, but Rizzy was one that just never took off. Lizzie seems too intense for Rafael, and Raf doesn't exactly seem like the kind of guy that would give her the level of attention and devotion she requires. This ship was kind of a flop in season 1, and frankly, I'd prefer it stayed that way. Moving on. Number 45, Damon and Rebekah. Damon and Rebekah spent 1 or 2 hot nights tearing each other's clothes off, but that's about it. They did, however, have a ton of good verbal sparring matches, which were always fun to watch. It's hard to properly rank a ship that basically comes down to that one night we had hate sex, but hookups like this were what The Vampire Diaries was really built on. Number 44, Hayley and Elijah. Okay, this is the one that's gonna get me in so much trouble. I really wanted to rank Elijah higher on the list, but all the passion and angst in the world can't distract anyone from the cold, hard truth. Hayley and Elijah had issues, not the least of which being that he kind of got her killed in the final season of the originals. Even show creator Julie Plec said that she didn't feel right pairing them together after so much violence had gone on between them. Whether you consider their love story to be one of the best or worst the shared universe ever created, at least you can comfort yourself with the knowledge that they really did give it all they had. Number 43, Klaus and Aurora. For as long as we've known Klaus, he's kind of been teetering on the brink of insanity, but that's also what we love most about him. Aurora, on the other hand, has been bat crazy her entire life, and it was so not a good look on her. This weird, obsessive, let's see who can out crazy the other romance was not to my taste at all, except for like a minute and a half where it totally was. Number 42, Kim and MG. I can't claim to be a huge fan of Kim and MG's romance on Legacies, though I do love that their names fit together to make like a Kim G ship name. Like, they should just be in-game based on that alone. Unfortunately, the show never really gave them the screen time they needed to get us invested in their love story before Kim decided she'd had enough of supernatural shenanigans and left Mystic Falls. Number 41, Elijah and Antoinette. On every TV show, there are ships that kind of make you shrug and go, meh. And Elijah and Antoinette were definitely one of those ships. Even with memory lost, hidden pasts, and romantic piano duets, this couple was kind of just blah. Yeah, like if you don't have a ship name, what's the point? Number 40, Sebastian and Lizzie. Sebastian and Lizzie may have had potential, but in the end, it turned out to be wasted potential. Their chemistry was off the charts, but like most teenagers swept up in romance, they never really took the time to connect or learn more about each other. Maybe that's why they ended on such a sour note. That's right, Lizzie, you run away from the guy who tries to turn you into a vampire without your consent. Number 39, Jeremy and Vicki. Oh, remember Jeremy and Vicki back in the glory days of The Vampire Diaries? I think everyone was kind of rooting for these two. They had that whole rebels who are too cool for school but not too cool for love thing going on. Ultimately though, I don't think Vicki would have ever calmed down enough for Jeremy, who was really only pretending to be a wild child to deal with his parents' death. This ship, It just wasn't meant to be. Number 38, Matt and Caroline. Every time I look back on Matt and Caroline, they make me super nostalgic, even if it was obvious from the start that they probably weren't going to end up together. This ship was a cute teen romance between two characters we all loved dearly, but who never quite fit perfectly together. That being said, if there were no vampires or life or death circumstances in Mystic Falls, Caroline absolutely would have been endgame material. Number 37, Stefan and Valerie. Stefan and Valerie may have had one of the weirdest love stories I've ever seen, but there was still a small part of me that shipped these two together. There was something really tragic about the life they could have had together raising their baby back in 1864. Sadly, Stefan had like 5 more appealing ships than this one, which is probably why this romance just never took off with the fans. It certainly was no Stelena or Caroline, but I still kind of liked it. Number 36, Hope and Rafael. Legacies made a solid attempt at creating another love triangle between two brothers and the show's female lead, but no one was really feeling it between Rafael, Hope, and Landon. Rafael and Hope have a great friendship going on, but it's probably best left there considering how much more fans seem to prefer her relationship with Landon. Number 35, Camille and Marcel. Sorry to Marcel fans, these two had decent chemistry, but they just never got the attention that they needed as a couple, so their love story faded into obscurity. It happens to the best of us. Number 34, Jade and Josie. Josie and Jade started off on opposing sides in Kai's prison world, but after Jade turned her humanity back on, things started to change between them. You don't really tend to have sex dreams about people you're not into, you know? Jade and Josie are kind of perfect for each other, considering they both understand having a dark side and fighting to rise above it. Number 33, Caroline and Enzo. Sure, Caroline and Enzo never really made it past the friend zone, but I wouldn't have hated it if they'd had a thing. When Enzo was at his worst, Caroline brought out the lighthearted, carefree side of him, and he brought out some of her more rebellious qualities. Plus, all things considered, he really was her type. A morally scrupulous Brit who would burn the world down for the people he loves. Now, why does that sound familiar? Poor Corinzo. I liked them. Number 32, Lizzie and MG. Every day, Legacy seems to go back and forth about whether MG and Lizzie are the perfect soulmates or the perfect best friends. Could they possibly be both? Sure, Lizzie takes MG for granted sometimes, and MG can be a little thoughtless, but that doesn't mean these two aren't connected in a deep, meaningful way that most people can only dream of. And there definitely seemed to be some chemistry there when they kissed before the merge. Number 31, Nora and Mary Louise. Though we only got them for one season, Nora and Mary Louise had us all wrapped around their finger from the moment they said hello. You can't really help but love a bad girl, and two bad girls together? Irresistible. My favorite thing about this ship is that while it was clear Nora and Mary Louise didn't give a damn about much of anything in this world, they did care deeply about each other. Number 30, Klaus and Hayley. Do not come for me. I'm a nice person, I swear. When the originals first premiered, I was sure that Klaus and Hayley would eventually fall deeply in love and live happily ever after with their loophole baby. Ultimately though, these two just weren't meant for more than one really hot night. That being said, watching them as co-parents just proves that not all ships have to be romantic to be satisfying. Number 29, Roman and Hope. Roman and Hope's sweet, timid flirtation on the originals was like a breath of fresh air after some of the intense, life-changing, and epic love stories we've been getting for 5 straight years on that show. And can I just say, whoever came up with the ship name Rope was having too much fun that day? Rope would have ranked higher if the whole relationship wasn't just Roman's ploy to get close to Hope's family. Number 28, Stefan and Rebekah. One of the series' best flashbacks included the revelation that Stefan and Rebekah had actually been an item back in the 1920s. And while the romance is probably best left in the age of Prohibition, it was always one of my favorites. Number 27, Lizzie and Hope. Hope and Lizzie would definitely have the whole enemies to lovers thing going for them if they ever decided to take the plunge together. The bond we've seen these two develop over the course of Legacies has been so wonderful to watch, and while at the moment I prefer them as badass besties, I wouldn't hate to see them head towards romance someday. Number 26, Jeremy and Anna. When the Vampire Diaries first paired Jeremy and Anna together, it was the cutest, sweetest, purest thing in the world. They somehow fit perfectly together, and not even multiple deaths could keep them apart. Losing this couple was hard, but at least Ghost Anna came back occasionally. Number 25, Damon and Katherine. Okay, call me crazy, but even through all of the scheming and manipulation, the spark between Damon and Katherine was just undeniable. Maybe it was the fact that they both put up a dark, diabolical front to mask their real feelings about the way their lives turned out. This ship wasn't one for the ages, but it's certainly one we'll never forget. Number 24, Bonnie and Cole. You know a fandom is strong when it can build a ship out of like 2 episodes and 10 lines of dialogue, but that's about all Bonnie Bennett and Cole Michelson ever shared. And yet somehow fans rallied behind this ship enough to make me want to see if there was actually more there. Kenneth's always going to kind of feel like the one that got away in terms of ships that totally should have happened but just never did. Number 23, Klaus and Camille. Despite their messy ending, Klaus and Camille's relationship showed us sides of each of those characters that we otherwise would never have seen. Klaus getting a therapist was probably the best thing that ever happened to him. Dating that therapist, probably not. But that's okay. Though the relationship was missing some of the passion usually found in the Vampire Diaries and the original ships, it was still absolutely heartbreaking to watch Klaus lose a woman who meant so much to him when Camille died. Number 22, Josie and Landon. The short-lived romance between Josie and Landon wasn't super popular with fans, but it was perfectly in character for both of these self-sacrificing loners to find their way to one another. It may not have been a romance for the ages, but it was an age-appropriate and utterly endearing one. And that's certainly more than most ships on this list can say. Number 21, Cole and Davina. As one of the few ships that managed to make it out of the original series finale alive, I have to give Cole and Davina props. Their love story survived multiple deaths, body swaps, and that pesky problem of Cole accidentally murdering her that one time. I want nothing more than peace and happiness for eternity for these two crazy kids. Top 20. Here we go. Number 20, Alaric and Jenna. While some fans believe that Alaric's love life is cursed, those of us who watched the early years of The Vampire Diaries know better. Alaric will simply never find someone as perfect for him as Jenna Summers, which means he's destined to fall in and out of subpar relationships forever. Poor guy, it is rough when your soulmate dies so early on in the franchise. Number 19, Klaus and Stefan. Yeah, I said it, and I stand by it. Klaus and Stefan had chemistry coming out of their ears, and you're seriously trying to tell me that nothing happened between these two during their days of debauchery in the 1920s? Yeah, right. I'm calling bull. If I'd had my way, Clefin would have been number 1 on this list, but I was overruled. Number 18, Jackson and Hayley. Jackson and Hayley may not have had that irresistible fire that some of the best TVD ships boasted, but they had something that very few other pairings had. A rock-solid friendship built on trust and understanding that grew organically into true love. Considering how crazy their world was, they both needed a relationship like this to keep them sane, which is maybe why people ended up loving it so much. By people, I mean me. Next up, number 17, Katherine and Elijah. Katherine and Elijah shared maybe a handful of scenes together throughout the entire course of The Vampire Diaries, but they're still somehow one of 3 ships I would watch an entire spinoff about. It was always hard to tell whether Katherine truly loved him or was just using him to get one over on Klaus. And similarly, you could never really tell if Elijah would pick her over his loyalty to his brother. It was all just so juicy. Their love stood the test of time and somehow overcame hybrid-sized grudges. And that's about as romantic as it gets, even if they didn't end up together. Number 16, Rebekah and Marcel. Though it's impossible not to love Marcel and Rebekah, especially when you remember that they will one day take the cure and grow old together, this couple had one major problem. One of them wasn't on the show all that often, which meant their romance faded to the background every time Rebekah left town. I'll put this in the category of ships that were done dirty by behind-the-scenes logistical stuff. Number 15, Bonnie and Damon. The Damon saga was one of the most topsy-turvy things to ever happen on The Vampire Diaries, and I loved every minute of it. From shipping them a little bit in season 1 to hating everything about them in season 3 to watching them grow into best buds in season 6, Bonnie and Damon went on a journey unparalleled by any ship in the TVD universe. Number 14, Elijah and Gia. I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, but if I had to pick between all of Elijah's ships, Gia Elijah would probably win out. Sure, they weren't star-crossed lovers or centuries-old flames, but if you're looking for great chemistry and a healthy dynamic, which Elijah was kind of lacking with others, Gia Elijah is definitely the ship for you. We'll just ignore how they ended. Did she burn alive? No! Happily ever after. Number 13, Hope and Landon. Hope and Landon are pretty much the Stelena of Legacies. They're probably not a pairing that will be endgame, no matter how heartbroken that will leave us all, but they are integral to the DNA of the series nonetheless. We should all just be content to enjoy watching a sweet young couple strive for their happy ending in a crazy supernatural world. Number 12, Josh and Aiden. Babies. They're so cute! Oh, Josh and Aiden, that ship that was just too pure for this world, literally. Though both bit the dust before the originals ended, their love story was super sweet. And hey, at least we got to see them reunite in the afterlife. Now that is as endgame as it gets. Number 11, Bonnie and Jeremy. If any of you ever had a crush on your older sibling friends, you will understand my undying love for Jeremy. There was something so gratifying about watching Bonnie realize that Jeremy had grown up to be a sweet, sexy, utterly dateable guy and was no longer just Elena's annoying kid brother. Even though they didn't end up together, they still deserve a really high ranking on this epic list of ships. Top 10, here we go! Number 10, Penelope and Josie. It's remarkable how deeply fans fell for the Posey ship, considering Penelope was in so few episodes before she bounced. There's just something intoxicating about a bad girl who do bad things for the girl she loves. If you come for Josie, Penelope will come for you. Number 9, Stefan and Catherine. Is it weird that I always kind of thought Stefan and Catherine would end up together? Don't get me wrong, that relationship was toxic at best sometimes, but when they were on screen together, you just could not pull your eyes away from them. It was like watching a really sexy, complicated train wreck. If Catherine had ended up getting a redemption arc, I think this def would have happened. Number 8, Tyler and Caroline. Considering how often Tyler and Caroline were separated by distance or evil hybrids or opposing loyalties, it's still kind of remarkable that they turned out to be one of the most memorable ships the Vampire Diaries ever created. It mixed the sweetness of Marilyn with the passion of Caroline and then added a nice Romeo and Juliet vibe, given that werewolves and vampires were supposedly mortal enemies. It all blended together to create one of the most beloved ships in the Vampire Diaries history. Number 7, Freya and Keelin. I'm not sure I completely understood the term OTP until Freeland. Freya and Keelin had their ups and their downs on the originals, to be sure, but through it all there was never a doubt that these two strong, smart, sexy women were absolutely made for one another. Knowing that they're living out their happily ever after in New Orleans with a cute little baby named Nick is sometimes the only thing that gets me through the day. Number 6, Stefan and Caroline. Please don't leave angry comments. It's shocking that Caroline is one of only a handful of TVD ships to make it down the aisle. Poor Stefan seemed doomed to be forever locked in a love triangle with Damon and Elena until Caroline Forbes entered his life. Not only did he no longer have to deal with the brotherly rivalry BS, he got to marry his best friend, who he knew would support him through thick and thin. If only it hadn't taken them so long to figure out how awesome they could be together, they might have cracked the top 5 of this list. Number 5, Bonnie and Enzo. Sometimes it's hard to ship two characters that are thrown together at the end of a series as opposed to at the beginning, but that was just not the case with Bonnie and Enzo. One minute they were two characters who never really interacted much, and the next they were epic loves who had this strong relationship built on trust and compassion and a lot of laughter. Honestly, they fit so well together it's kind of upsetting they didn't get their happy ending. Number 4, Stefan and Elena. Of all the ships to ever grace the Vampire Diaries shared universe, Stefan and Elena was truly special. Maybe it's because we just associate their love story with some of the best years the Vampire Diaries ever had, or maybe their connection really was just too epic for words. Whatever the case, Stelena was one for the history books, and I dare you to say different. Number 3, Hope and Josie. It might seem weird to put this ship so high on our list considering it's not technically canon, yet, but I will not apologize for it. Putting aside the obvious fact that these girls are definitely majorly into each other, Hope and Josie have proven over and over again that they understand each other on a deep, intimate level. They're also willing to go to the ends of the earth to keep each other safe and happy. That kind of devotion paired with a healthy, supportive dynamic is just a killer combination. Hosier bust. Number 2, Klaus and Caroline. Klaus and Caroline are officially the only ship on this list to exist on all 3 shows, which kind of puts them in a category all their own. And yes, I count that newspaper clipping in the Legacies wish world, fight me. It's a real bummer that they never got the timing right, but maybe that's what makes this ship one of the best in the history of the Vampire Diaries universe. They were enemies, they were lovers, they were kind of even friends for a minute there, and the fact that they never really got a chance to be together only makes their romance feel more epic. Plus, it's kind of impossible not to swoon when a guy declares he'll be your last love. I mean, come on.
He's your first love. I intend to be your last.
Oh my god, we've reached number 1. This is the end. And finally, number 1, Damon and Elena. Was there ever any doubt that this list would end with Delena on top? Whether you love Damon and Elena together or not, there's no denying this couple was iconic, and a huge part of the Vampire Diaries' success was built on their love story. I mean, the show even continued to revolve around them after Nina Dobrev left the series and Elena was put on ice for 2 whole years. Sure, we would have preferred for them to not have different versions of the same fight for 4 seasons in a row, but that doesn't mean we don't get major chills whenever we rewatch their first kiss or their happily ever after. But seriously, can we roll that clip of their first kiss? Because honestly,
if I'm gonna feel guilty about something, I'm gonna feel guilty about this.
It's everything. It's so epic. They earned number 1 on this list and every list of all time. Okay, so Delena was our number 1 ship, but now I want to know what your number 1 ship is from the Vampire Diaries, the originals, and Legacies. Let us know in the comments below.